So in the previous video, about 2 days ago, we actually hit a new all-time high. I don't think it was actually live in terms of the difficulty, but we did hit a new difficulty. We were talking about trying to look at difficulty, a deep dive into it, all of that stuff. But mainly we were looking and showing how the difficulty is measured on all of these devices. And we actually checked, and the Zyber 8 at the time had done a 1.3T difficulty, which is super high. So we're going to get into all of that today. And this has actually been the one that's got most of our highest difficulties as time has gone on. The Nerd QX had around 898G, so that's just around 100G below the T value. The Zyber 8 has been actually posting a bunch of higher difficulty shares recently, at least in the last 2 to 3 months when we have it. So we had one for 50G, I believe, and then we had one for 139G, and we recently just had one 2 days ago, technically, for around 1.31T. So that's very high in terms of difficulties. So these are more update videos. I guess we're trying to do some educational videos, but this is kind of just an update video. Also, we have the Avalon Nano currently mining to solohash.uk, which is a Bitcoin Cash node, and we just hit a highest difficulty on that of 51G, which is higher than our Node QX. So the Avalon Nano did get a very high difficulty of 51G just recently on a Bitcoin Cash pool that we were mining to. But since making that last video around 2 days ago, it has been around a couple of weeks since we actually made that video. So it's kind of skipped forward in time, probably around 3 weeks since we saw the share, and we just got back to recording now. So let's head over to the computer, let's take a look at it, and I'll explain kind of what we're doing with the whole farm. But before we get into that, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, Crypto Miner Bros.
Since 2018, CryptoMinerBros.com has been the premier site for top-tier crypto mining hardware, earning the trust of miners across the globe. The prices displayed on their site cover shipping and DDP straight to your doorstep, ensuring no unexpected costs at checkout. They deliver to over 100 countries and even provide lower invoicing options to help you cut down on customs fees. Payment is a breeze with options like direct bank transfer or cryptocurrencies including Bitcoin, USDT, or Ethereum. With over 250 ASIC options, they stock some of the channel's favorites like the bitaxe Touch, and the Avalon Nano 3S. Join tens of thousands of happy customers who rely on CryptoMinerBros.com for dependable hardware fulfillment, clear pricing, and a top-notch service. Check out CryptoMinerBros.com today, link in the description.
Okay, so if you saw the last video, then you'd know that we kind of hit this, and we talked a little bit about difficulty, a deeper dive into it, what it really means for solo Bitcoin mining. So if you really want to educate yourself about, or if you're getting new into the crypto mining or solo Bitcoin mining and you want to educate yourself, then I highly recommend going to watch that video, because it's very educational for people that have just started solo mining Bitcoin or any other solo mining coins that you want to mine with the bitaxe or Nerd QX. So as I said, this was hit on the Zyber 8S. So there is a newer version of the Zyber 8, which we covered a couple of videos ago, which is the Zyber 8G. And that currently has the S21 Pro chips. But the current Zyber 8 that we're using has the S21, just the regular ones. If you can see here, we'll go on to the logs. We'll show right here, or it says it right there, BM1368. So that's the ASIC that's underneath. But as I said, we have been hitting very high difficulties with the Zyber 8. We did hit that one which was around 139, and then the next day we hit one for 898G on the Nerd QX. And now we're finally, this is my first ever difficulty that is in the T range. So when we go over to Bitcoin network difficulty, it's currently at 142, which is actually really high compared to it. So it's about 142 times
what we had on our difficulty to actually achieve a Bitcoin block. Now that is very high compared to what you'd normally see. I think the odds of actually getting that, or at least up to the T value range, is 1 in a couple of 100 years. But over time, if you have more miners, you're bound to get one at some point, because you're basically adding to the probability. But it seems like this Zyber 8 and the Nerd QXs tend to do really higher difficulty shares, but I haven't really seen much on my bitaxes. If you look on the swarm here, the highest that I've had on the regular bitaxes that we're running is 1.39G, and then this is the hex, so I'm not including that. 1.21, 18.4, which is actually very high for a Supra, and then a Gamma, which is 4.54. So I think we just hit that as well in this session, but we'll check up on that later on. Is there anything else that we have changed on here? I don't think so. This bitaxe hex is 8.29, that's the highest it's done. The Nerd QX is still 25.9. We hit that quite a while ago on the original Nerd QX, and that's the Nerd QX which has been running the longest. So I would expect it to see a little bit higher than that from that Nerd QX. But overall, I think 1.13T is probably the highest we're going to see for quite a while on the channel. We haven't really seen anything near that for the last 2 months, apart from this 898G, and I don't think any of these are going to be hitting it just based on probability. We shouldn't be hitting another T value, but then again, at the end of the day, it is just luck on the network. So we have made some adjustments since hitting that, and we've moved some of our miners over to the Bitcoin Cash solo mining, which we switched our Avalon Nano over to maybe around 3 weeks ago, and that was through solohash.co.uk. The main reason that we're using this one is because the ping to the pool is very good for where we're situated. So we had the Avalon Nano running on this probably, I think, for about 3 weeks, and then yesterday we decided to add the both Nerd QXs onto here, plus the Zyber 8, and that brings us up to around 19.46 terahash on here. So best share today is 2.9G, and the best share ever is 51G, and that came from the Avalon Nano. The only reason I know that is because we switched them a day ago, so we saw this previously before we added the rest of the miners on. Now this user effort, I don't know how that is measured, but I'm just making kind of an update video at this point because we have something to talk about. And our block probability is 1 every 5 years with this amount of hash rate. So I'm thinking we also switch the, we switch the bitaxe hex over to Bitcoin Cash as well, and then we just solo mine Bitcoin for the rest of the bitaxes. I actually think that this share was submitted to Parasite Pool, so we can go check that out as well. So here is our user address. We still have some hash rate on it, so around 5.57. I think that's coming from the hex, which is there. The Nerd QX, so that's dropping off, so that's technically not there. And then maybe this is a Gamma, that's the Supra, and that's pretty much what's left on there currently. But as you can see there, the Zyber 8 hit 1.13 terahash, and that's around 0.7939% of the current network difficulty. Now I think that there was some sort of reset on the pool, because it says pool uptime here is 51 days, but when we go back here, we've been uptime for 105 days mining on the network. And so I think there's a difference between the uptime displayed here and the uptime displayed on your actual network address. But one thing that we did see was this leaderboard was being hit. So we were not on the leaderboard technically, but we were on the top difficulties. So if we scroll down here, I think that this is ours, 1.38, or down here, sorry, number 17, 1.13T, which if we go back to our address is LKD, and we'll just check that here. So 1.13. So we're currently number 17 on top difficulties. Top loyalties, I don't think we're on this list either. It only goes down to 99. but the lowest difficulty that you'd have to submit is 65G to get on this leaderboard. And then maybe potentially we're on the other leaderboard if we check here. So LKD, no, so we're not on this actual user leaderboard. I think there's a difference between the difficulty and loyalty. So if you have the number 1 loyalty but not as much difficulty, you still rank higher. So it's a mix between both of them. But yeah, there's been some interesting things going on Parasite Pool as well. We've seen massive hash rate kind of spikes upwards. I don't really know where that's coming from, and I haven't really been checking it that often. But the time to find a block is 2 or maybe even 3 years right there. And the highest pool difficulty is still 39.4. I think that was hit quite a while ago on this pool. So as I said, I know I'm kind of into solo mining Bitcoin and I really enjoy making videos on it, but I thought we would just mix things up on the channel for kind of the next 3 months, just mining different things, opening up new possibilities for newer people in the mining space to try and get into solo mining. And I think one of the easiest ways is to show them how to solo mine blocks for anything that's smaller. So something like a Bitcoin Cash or a Digibyte, and that will hopefully get them into solo mining and end up mining or solo mining Bitcoin. So that's kind of why we're doing these changes on the channel. We're trying to get more people to get a bitaxe, buy a bitaxe, and have that autonomy of solo mining. So I think Solo Hash, if you look here, it has 3 pools. So you can solo mine Digibyte and you can solo mine Bitcoin. I think we have one Gamma, which is currently on Digibyte if we see here. So this one is 1.1 terahash, so that is with a Gamma, and the best share is only 388. I believe that the difficulty is sitting at around 1G for currently, at least on the Digibyte network. So again, if we go to the difficulty list, I always use this Mining Dutch difficulty list because it lists them all out here. I've never really seen another website that lists out the difficulty for kind of all the coins, but this is just an interesting one. You don't really have to use Mining Dutch as a pool, but even to look at this chart gives you some idea of what kind of coins you could be hitting. So if we were mining to a Bitcoin Cash node, we would have hit a block which is worth around $1,800. So we've missed out on 2 Bitcoin Cash blocks already, basically. So we've missed out on around $4,000 overall just from those 2 shares, one from the Zyber 8 and the other one from the Node QX. But we could have hit also any of these coins down here. But I don't really know how these coins work at the top here. So Namecoin, Fractal Bitcoin, because Fractal Bitcoin down here, this one says merged, which I don't really know what that means. But realistically, if you're looking at this, you'd only want to be mining Bitcoin, and then the next one down would be Bitcoin Cash. In my opinion, eCash, maybe, potentially. Then probably Bitcoin SV as well. But if we keep going down, Digibyte is the main one that people go for. So 584 million, that's the current network difficulty. And that changes quite often. So as I said, we could have had that Bitcoin Cash block, but that's probably the main reason that we changed it over to Bitcoin Cash. We want to get people into mining it, but we also want to display that you can hit a Bitcoin Cash block, or we can hit a Digibyte block with one of these. So that's the main reason that we're trying to display that, because it gets more views and then people will get interested in solo mining. But overall, we haven't seen actually anything from this bitaxe Supra in a while, and that best difficulty is 18.4G, which this is the original first bitaxe that we ever bought. So that has been going since last year actually, and that's the highest difficulty that is ever hit, is 18.4G since last year. You can kind of see how the Nerd QXs, even the Hex, the Zyber 8, the Parasite Pool Nerd QX, kind of far surpass a lot of the bitaxes, just because even though we had them probably around 3 to 4 months ago, they are hitting higher difficulties just because there's more chips on the board, and in theory there should be more probability of you hitting a higher share on the network. So I also thought about trying to underclock a lot of these. In the previous video, we're trying to bring the power down to at least 300 watts going into the winter time. So the Avalon Nano, that's going to have to go on eco mode basically, and so is the Zyber 8, and the rest of the bitaxes we're probably going to take off maybe the Supra, or at least one of the gammas which is not as power hungry, because you have a bitaxe gamma down here which is 16, this AliExpress one which is 20, and then another one which is 14. If we could take one of them off, that's an extra 20 watts every day that we save. I also thought about doing an experiment where we put one of the bitaxes to each coin that we would like to mine. For example, we put one to Bitcoin, we put one to Bitcoin Cash, we put one to Bitcoin SV, and then we put one maybe to Fractal Bitcoin. Because we only have 4 of them, we burn out the other one. We can only pick 4 of the coins. But I think that would be a good experiment, but it would take a while for us to see the results of mining on that. And it would pretty much X us out of making different types of videos. So we'll see how that kind of progresses in the future, but maybe we'll make some other changes as well. So on this Zyber 8, we are currently running it on eco mode, which is the basically most efficient mode. But this wasn't even hit on the normal or performance mode. So it goes to show that you can be hitting higher difficulties even on this eco mode. It might just take a little bit longer. And I believe if we go into enable overclocks, this is the overclock for eco mode. So 490 and 1166, which we could actually apply to our Supra, which we have running here. So if we go into settings, so we already have it on 490 and 1166, so that's technically the most eco-friendly one. I don't know if that is default for the Zyber 8, because it is default for the Supra, and they're both running on the same chips, I believe. If we click back here and go on logs, you have BM1368, and on the logs here you have BM1368. There's just 8 times more chips on the Zyber 8 than you have on a bitaxe Supra. As you can see, most of the shares aren't really that high. This one's 10,000, 20,000 there, 2,000, 11,000. So it takes quite a while for you to hit even up into the 100,000 range, and then million, billion, trillion is going to take quite a while. One of these days I'd like to actually record this, or have at least a live stream of our logs, and then eventually we kind of see one difficulty that is around 1 million, and then hopefully one that is around 1 billion, and hopefully one that is around 1 trillion. So seeing it live on the actual logs would be good content, I guess, but also just to document it on the channel. So this was just a random update video because we hit that highest difficulty. If you guys have any ideas for what we should do with the farm going forward, please leave them in the comments below, or if you have any questions about difficulty, leave them in the comments below. As I said, I recommend you checking out the previous video about the deep dive into solo Bitcoin difficulty. If you enjoyed, make sure you like the video and subscribe for more content like this.